My dad forged documents to steal $160,000 against my welding shop. Then the FBI revealed he was running a $3.2 million fraud ring. Hi everyone. Today's story will blow your mind, but really quick, if you enjoy this content, hit that subscribe button. Channel's been a bit quiet lately, and your support keeps it all going. Let's jump in. Initial post. I'm still shaking as I type this. My hands are covered in welding burns from this week's marathon of contracts, and now I can barely hold my phone steady. I need to get this out because I don't know what else to do. I'm 26 years old and I own a welding shop. Not a huge operation, but it's mine. I bought the building 3 years ago with every penny I'd saved since I was 16, working nights, weekends, whatever it took. The property cost me $240,000, and I've been paying it down religiously. It's a 4,000 square foot warehouse with office space, perfect for the custom fabrication work I specialize in. This week alone, I completed contracts for 3 different construction companies: structural steel for a new apartment complex, custom railings for a historic renovation, and repair work on industrial equipment. 60-hour weeks aren't unusual for me, but this one was particularly brutal. My father has always looked down on my career choice. He's 58, works at a luxury car dealership, and wears suits that cost more than some people's monthly rent. He's constantly telling me I'm wasting my potential, that I should be in an office somewhere, not playing with fire and metal like a caveman. His exact words from last Christmas dinner. Meanwhile, he's been funding my younger brother's endless string of failed businesses. My brother is 24 and has never held a real job for more than 3 months. He drives for rideshare apps when he needs quick cash, but mostly he pitches dad on his next big idea. This morning, I was reviewing invoices in my office, still covered in yesterday's grinding dust, when I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a representative from a lending company I'd never heard of, calling about my recent loan application. I told them there must be some mistake. I hadn't applied for any loans. My shop is profitable, and I'm actually ahead on my mortgage payments. The representative got quiet, then asked if I could verify some information. They had my property address, my business tax ID, even my social security number. But the signature on the application wasn't mine. They emailed me the documents while we were still on the phone. My father had forged my signature on a $160,000 loan application, using my commercial property as collateral. The documents were sophisticated forgeries. He'd somehow gotten copies of my deed, my business registration, even my tax returns. The loan application claimed I needed the money for business expansion and equipment purchases. The funds had been disbursed 2 weeks ago to an account that wasn't mine. When I called the bank listed on the disbursement paperwork, they confirmed the account belonged to my father. I immediately called him, my hands trembling so badly I could barely dial. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice casual like any other day. When I confronted him about the loan, there was a long pause. Then he said, "I was going to tell you. Your brother's new venture needed capital, and you're too stubborn to see the opportunity. This is an investment in the family's future." An investment. He called stealing $160,000 against my property an investment. He went on to explain that my brother had developed a revolutionary app for connecting people with personal shoppers. They'd already burned through $80,000 in 2 weeks on marketing and infrastructure. The rest was earmarked for operational expenses over the next month. When I demanded he return the money immediately, he laughed. Actually laughed. He said the money was already committed, contracts were signed, and once the app took off, I'd be thanking him for making me a millionaire. I hung up and immediately called my lawyer, then the police. The officer I spoke with told me this was likely a federal crime since it involved fraud across state lines and fraudulent loan documents. They advised me to contact the FBI's white-collar crime division. I spent the rest of the morning on the phone with federal investigators, my bank, and my insurance company. The investigator assigned to my case seemed particularly interested when I mentioned where my father worked. She asked detailed questions about the dealership, how long he'd worked there, and whether he had access to financial documents there. Her questions seemed oddly specific, like she was confirming information she already knew. My lawyer ran a title search and found something even more disturbing. This wasn't the first inquiry on my property in recent months. There had been 3 other soft inquiries from different lenders, all in the past 6 months. My father had been shopping around, trying to find a lender who wouldn't ask too many questions. The successful loan came from a company known for subprime commercial lending with minimal verification requirements. I'm sitting in my shop now, looking at all the equipment I've accumulated over the years. The CNC plasma cutter I saved for 2 years to buy. The welding stations I've upgraded piece by piece. The metal inventory I've built up for quick turnaround jobs. All of it could be gone because my father decided my success was his to gamble with. The federal investigator called back an hour ago. She said they're opening a formal investigation and warned me not to contact my father or brother again without law enforcement present. She also said something that chilled me: this may be connected to a larger investigation we're conducting. We'll be in touch very soon. I don't know what to do. I've worked 7 days a week for years to build this business. I've turned down vacations, relationships, everything, to make this shop successful. And now it might all disappear because my father thought he knew better. The loan company has already sent a notice of payment due in 30 days for the first installment, $4,800. Money for a loan I never took, for a business I want no part of. Has anyone dealt with anything like this? Can they really take my shop if I don't pay a fraudulent loan? I'm meeting with my lawyer again tomorrow, but I'm terrified I'm going to lose everything I've worked for. Update 1, 2 weeks later. I wasn't prepared for how deep this went. Remember how the federal investigator seemed particularly interested in my father's workplace? It turns out the FBI has been investigating his dealership for 8 months. My father wasn't just a salesman. He was running a sophisticated title fraud scheme with the finance manager and 2 other salespeople. Here's how it worked. They would take luxury cars that came in for service, duplicate the keys, forge ownership documents, and sell the cars to unknowing buyers out of state. The original owners wouldn't know their cars were sold until weeks or months later when the buyers tried to register them. By then, the money had been laundered through a series of shell companies. The dealership would claim the documents were stolen and file insurance claims for identity theft. They'd done this with 43 vehicles over 2 years, totaling nearly $3.2 million in fraudulent sales. The investigation accelerated when they tried to do it with the wrong car, a limited edition Mercedes belonging to a federal judge's wife. The judge's wife had brought it in for routine maintenance. When she received a notice about her recent sale from the DMV 3 states over, she immediately contacted law enforcement. The FBI had been building their case ever since. My father's fraud against me was apparently his attempt to make one last score before everything collapsed. He knew the investigation was closing in. A coworker had been questioned by federal agents and warned everyone involved. My father figured he could take the money from my property, fund my brother's business, and either flee or have enough money for legal defense. The federal agents executed search warrants yesterday at 6 a.m. They raided the dealership, my father's house, and my brother's apartment simultaneously. I know this because a neighbor called me when they saw agents carrying boxes out of my childhood home. They found detailed records of the car fraud scheme on my father's computer, including spreadsheets tracking which cars had been sold, which documents had been forged, and how the money was distributed. But here's the part that made me physically sick. They also found records of my father's other forgeries. I wasn't his only victim. He'd taken out fraudulent loans against my uncle's rental property, $75,000, my grandmother's house, $110,000, and even opened credit cards in my deceased grandfather's name. The total fraud just within our family exceeded $400,000. My brother, it turns out, was more involved than I initially thought. The personal shopper app was completely fake. There was no app development, no marketing campaign, no infrastructure. The money went directly into cryptocurrency, which my brother was supposed to move offshore. They'd already transferred $60,000 to accounts in the Cayman Islands. The FBI's cybercrime unit is now involved, tracking the cryptocurrency transactions and working to freeze the offshore accounts. The agents interviewed me for 6 hours yesterday. They had me go through every document, every conversation, every interaction with my father over the past 2 years. They asked about family dinners where he'd mentioned money troubles, about his spending habits, about my brother's previous failed businesses. It turns out 3 of those businesses were likely money laundering fronts. My father is being held without bail. He's charged with 47 counts of fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, and identity theft. Each count of wire fraud alone carries up to 20 years in federal prison. His dealership immediately fired him and is cooperating fully with the investigation. The dealership's owner, who apparently had no knowledge of the scheme, is devastated. He's been in business for 30 years and is now facing lawsuits from every victim. My brother was arrested at the airport. He had a one-way ticket to Thailand and $30,000 in cash divided among his luggage. He's charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and attempting to flee prosecution. He's being held on $500,000 bail that no one in our family can or will pay. The loan against my property has been frozen pending the investigation. My lawyer says that because it was clearly fraudulent and I'm a victim of identity theft, I won't be held liable for it. However, recovering the money my father stole is another matter. The FBI is working to trace all the funds, but some may be unrecoverable. My mother called me sobbing yesterday. She had no idea about any of this. She thought my father's income from the dealership was legitimate. Now she's learned that their savings, their retirement funds, even their house might be seized as proceeds of crime. She's staying with my aunt and has already filed for divorce. The welding shop has become my refuge. I've been working 18-hour days, not because I need to, but because it's the only place that makes sense anymore. When I'm welding, when I'm creating something solid and real from raw metal, I can forget that my father destroyed our family for money. I can forget that my brother, who I taught to ride a bike, was planning to flee the country with stolen funds. My employees have been incredible. Word got out in our industrial district about what happened. Other shop owners have been sending us overflow work, and my biggest client accelerated a contract to help with cash flow. The community that my father looked down on, the blue-collar cavemen, as he called us, are the ones keeping me afloat. I'll update again after the preliminary hearings next month. Update 2, 6 weeks later. The preliminary hearings were a circus, but the real bombshell came from the forensic accountants. My father's scheme was more elaborate than anyone realized. The FBI's forensic accounting team found 17 different bank accounts, 3 shell corporations, and a complex web of transfers designed to hide the money. They also discovered he'd been embezzling from the dealership for 5 years before the car fraud even started. He'd been inflating service invoices and pocketing the difference, stealing an average of $3,000 per month. During the hearing, my father tried to claim he was forced into it by gambling debts. He said he owed money to dangerous people and was desperate. The prosecutor destroyed this defense in minutes. They had his bank records showing regular trips to Vegas, yes, but also purchases of a $90,000 boat, a vacation home in Florida he'd hidden from my mother, and monthly transfers to a woman who wasn't my mother, his girlfriend of 3 years that none of us knew about. The woman, a 32-year-old hostess from a casino, was also arrested. She'd been helping him launder money through her beauty salon, which existed only on paper. She'd flip immediately when arrested, providing investigators with recorded conversations where my father bragged about his schemes and called his family too stupid to notice what he was doing. My brother's situation got worse. They found messages on his phone dating back 2 years, showing he knew about the car fraud scheme from the beginning. He'd actually suggested targeting specific vehicles based on their resale value. He'd researched cryptocurrency tumblers, offshore banking laws, and even looked into purchasing fake passports. He wasn't just a participant, he was an active planner. During his hearing, my brother tried to blame everything on my father, claiming he was manipulated and emotionally abused. The prosecutor presented text messages where my brother called me an idiot who wastes his life playing with metal, and said he couldn't wait to show everyone what real success looks like with his app business. There were also messages where he discussed taking out additional fraudulent loans against my property if the first one wasn't enough. The investigation revealed something that explains why my father targeted me specifically. 3 months before the fraud, I'd been featured in a trade magazine about young entrepreneurs in manufacturing. The article mentioned my shop's annual revenue and growth projections. My father had shared the article on his social media, presenting himself as a proud parent, while secretly using the information to convince lenders I was a good credit risk. Here's where things get interesting. The dealership's insurance company conducted their own investigation and found evidence that 2 other employees were running similar but separate schemes. The entire finance department is now under investigation. The dealership owner, cleared of any wrongdoing, is suing my father and the others for damages exceeding $5 million. His lawyers have indicated they'll be seeking to pierce the corporate veil and go after personal assets of all involved parties. The federal prosecutor offered my father a plea deal: plead guilty to 15 counts, cooperate fully, and serve 9 to 12 years in federal prison. If he goes to trial and loses, he's looking at potentially 30+ years. The prosecutor made it clear that with the evidence they have, conviction is virtually certain. My father has until next week to decide. My brother was offered 5 to 7 years if he cooperates, or up to 15 if he goes to trial. His lawyer is pushing him to take the deal, but my brother still seems to think he can talk his way out of this. As for recovery, the FBI has frozen approximately $380,000 in various accounts. The cryptocurrency presents a challenge, but they've recovered about $45,000 of the $60,000 that was transferred. The vacation home in Florida is being seized and will be sold at auction. The boat has already been repossessed. My grandmother's house was saved. The fraudulent loan hadn't been fully processed yet. My uncle's rental property situation is complicated, but his insurance is covering the legal fees to clear the title. The credit cards in my grandfather's name have been canceled, and the credit bureaus have been notified of the identity theft. My mother's divorce was fast-tracked given the criminal circumstances. She was granted an emergency order giving her sole control of their joint accounts, what's left of them, and the primary residence. She's still in shock but has started seeing a therapist. She told me last week that she'd noticed irregularities in their finances over the years, but my father always had explanations. She blamed herself for not pushing harder for answers. My shop has become busier than ever. The publicity from the case, while embarrassing, has actually brought in new clients. People respect that I'm a victim who's fighting back, not letting it destroy my business. I've hired 2 new welders and am considering expanding to a second location. It's ironic. My father tried to steal my success, but his actions have actually accelerated my growth. I've also started dating someone, a forensic accountant I met during the investigation. She was assigned to help trace my business finances to separate them from the fraud. She says she's never seen someone keep such meticulous records. We bonded over spreadsheets and steel fabrication. My father would hate that I'm dating someone involved in his downfall, which honestly makes it even better. The most painful part? Going through evidence, I found a letter my brother wrote to my father 2 years ago. In it, he detailed his plan to eventually force me out of my business entirely, take it over, and run it properly. He wrote that I was wasting potential by doing the work myself instead of exploiting others' labor. He'd planned to convert my welding shop into some kind of co-working space for tech startups. My father had written "excellent thinking" in the margins. Update 3 months later. Today my father was sentenced to 9 years in federal prison. He took the plea deal. The courtroom was packed. Victims from the car fraud, the dealership owner, family members, and reporters filled every seat. My father, who once walked with such arrogance in his expensive suits, stood before the judge in a gray jumpsuit, looking like he'd aged a decade in 3 months. The victim impact statements were devastating. An elderly couple described how they'd lost their life savings buying a fraudulent Mercedes. A young family explained how the stress of the fraud investigation caused them to lose their small business. My grandmother, 83 years old, stood at the podium and told the court how her own son had tried to steal the home she'd lived in for 40 years. When it was my turn, I talked about more than the money. I explained how my father had belittled my career choice for years while secretly planning to steal everything that career had built. I described the sleepless nights, the panic attacks when loan documents arrived, the fear of losing my business. But I also talked about resilience, about how the welding community had rallied around me, and how I'd refused to let his betrayal define my future. My father's statement was pathetic. He blamed addiction, mental health, pressure to provide, everything except his own choices. He actually said he'd done it for the family, and that we'd understand one day. The judge interrupted him, calling his statement a continuation of the manipulative behavior that brought you here. The sentence: 9 years in federal prison, no possibility of early release, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. He must pay $3.2 million in restitution to the car fraud victims, $400,000 to family members, and $500,000 to the dealership. Any assets in his name will be liquidated. My brother was sentenced last week to 6 years. He tried to withdraw his plea deal at the last minute, claiming inadequate counsel, but the judge denied it. During his sentencing, he actually blamed me for not sharing my success with the family. The judge added 6 months for lack of remorse. He'll serve his time at a different facility than my father. The prosecutor said putting them together would be dangerous given how much they're now blaming each other. Here's the stunning part: the asset recovery has been extraordinary. The vacation home in Florida sold for $340,000. The boat brought in $65,000. The cryptocurrency recovery, through international cooperation, reached $52,000. Various bank accounts held $380,000. My father's girlfriend, in exchange for a suspended sentence, returned $90,000 she'd hidden. The luxury watches, designer clothes, and jewelry my father had bought totaled another $75,000 at auction. But the biggest surprise came from the dealership lawsuit. The owner's insurance company settled for $2.1 million, and because my father's crimes against me were part of the same pattern of behavior, I was included in the settlement as a damaged party. After the other victims were compensated, my portion came to $520,000. Combined with the recovered funds allocated to me from the criminal restitution, I received $520,000 total. I did something my father never would have expected. I invested it all back into my business. I purchased the abandoned warehouse next to my shop for $200,000 and converted it into a state-of-the-art fabrication facility. I bought 2 new CNC machines, a robotic welding system, and upgraded all our safety equipment. I hired 8 new employees, including 3 apprentices from the local technical school. We now have contracts with 2 aerospace companies and the city's public works department. But the expansion I'm most proud of? I opened 3 additional locations in underserved industrial areas, specifically targeting young people who want to learn trades. Each location offers paid apprenticeships and covers the cost of welding certifications. My father spent his life looking down on blue-collar work. I'm spending mine proving its value. The forensic accountant I'm dating has become my business manager. She helps structure the expansion to maximize efficiency and minimize tax liability, legally, something my father never learned. We're also investigating franchising opportunities. She jokes that she went from investigating fraud to preventing it. My mother is doing better. She sold the family home and bought a small condo near her sister. She's volunteering at a financial literacy nonprofit, helping others recognize signs of financial abuse. She sent my father divorce papers at the prison, which he signed without contest. She hasn't spoken to him since the sentencing and doesn't plan to. The strangest development? I got a call from the technical school where I learned welding. They want to create a scholarship in my name for students from challenging family circumstances. The investor. The dealership owner. He said that through all this tragedy, I showed the kind of character he wishes his own employees had demonstrated. The scholarship will cover full tuition, tools, and living expenses for 2 students per year. Last week, I drove past the luxury dealership where my father worked. They've rebranded completely, under new management, trying to distance themselves from the scandal. The finance department has been entirely restructured with multiple oversight mechanisms. They'll probably never fully recover their reputation. I've been in therapy for 2 months now, processing not just the betrayal but years of emotional manipulation. My therapist helped me realize that my father's contempt for my career was projection. He was jealous that I built something real while his success was built on lies. My brother's resentment came from the same place. They couldn't stand that the welder had succeeded through honest work. The FBI agent who led my case stopped by the shop last week. She said mine was one of the most clear-cut cases of familial financial fraud she'd seen, but also one of the best outcomes. Most victims never recover their money. She also mentioned that the investigation had spread to 3 other dealerships in the network, uncovering similar schemes. My father's arrest had triggered a domino effect that exposed corruption throughout the luxury car industry in our state. I still weld every day. Not because I have to. With 4 locations, I could easily just manage from an office. But because when I strike an arc and join 2 pieces of metal, I create something permanent, something real, something that can't be forged or faked. My father never understood that. He lived in a world of paper lies and digital deception. I live in a world of steel and fire, where integrity is measured in the strength of your welds. The money he stole to fund my brother's fake business? If they'd asked, I might have actually invested in something legitimate. But they didn't want a partner or an investor. They wanted a victim. Instead, they created a federal case that destroyed their own lives while ultimately making mine better. My father will be 67 when he gets out of prison. My brother will be 30. They'll have criminal records, no assets, and no family waiting for them. Meanwhile, I'll be running a multi-location welding empire that I built from the ground up, expanded with the very money they tried to steal from me. The last time I saw my father was at sentencing. As they led him away in shackles, he looked at me one last time. I expected anger or blame or even hatred. Instead, I saw something worse, recognition. He finally understood that the son he'd dismissed as a failure had become everything he'd pretended to be: successful, respected, and legitimate. I went back to my shop that day and worked until midnight, welding frames for a children's hospital playground. Each bead perfect, each joint solid, each piece built to last generations. That's the difference between us. He built nothing but lies that collapsed at the first investigation. I build things that endure. The shop is closed today for the first time in months. I'm taking my employees and their families to a baseball game. 23 people who depend on my business for their livelihoods, who trust me to lead with integrity. My father had one family and betrayed us all. I've built a new family, one forged in honest work and mutual respect. 9 years. 6 years. 4 locations. $520,000. Numbers that changed everything. The son my father said was wasting his potential now owns a welding empire built from the ashes of his father's crimes. The brother who called me an idiot is learning to make license plates in federal prison. And the father who said I'd never amount to anything is counting days in a cell, knowing that his caveman son succeeded not despite his betrayal, but because of it. I still have the Trade magazine article that started all this framed in my office. Next to it hangs my favorite quote: "Fire tests gold, adversity tests strong men." In my case, fire built my career, and adversity forged an empire. The investigation continues. More arrests are expected. My father's legacy won't be the successful businessman he pretended to be, but as patient zero in one of the largest auto dealership fraud investigations in federal history. My legacy. I'm just getting started. Tomorrow we break ground on location number 5. It'll be our largest yet, with a training center attached. We're calling it the Phoenix Facility, rising from the ashes of betrayal to become something greater. My father was right about one thing. I did waste potential. I wasted years seeking his approval when I should have been focused on proving him wrong. Now I don't have to prove anything to anyone. The federal prison system is doing that for me, one day at a time, for the next 9 years.